My cousin getting into Harvard. As everyone applauded, my grandmother sniffed. Some people just aren't academic. I took a deep breath and said, funny, I'm his professor. The silence was so loud you could hear the ceiling fan creak. I'd already decided I wasn't going to stay long. Maybe just long enough to have a plate of ribs, hug a few relatives I didn't hate, and give my mother the courtesy of showing up so she wouldn't get questions for weeks about why her son couldn't spare one afternoon a year for his family. She hated those questions even though she never said so out loud. The reunion was at my Uncle Frank's house in Raleigh. He lived in the kind of suburban neighborhood that had mailboxes with family names etched in brass, and a little stone path lined with solar lights that lit up perfectly every evening, like it was all part of a carefully managed performance. His backyard was trimmed like a country club, and he had one of those oversized grills that looked like it cost more than my car. I hadn't been to a reunion in 2 years. The last one, I left after an argument with Aunt Margaret about real careers when she left after I told her I taught at a university. You mean, like a high school teacher? She asked while dabbing ranch dressing off her chin. That's sweet. So no, I wasn't exactly itching to be back. I ironed my shirt twice. Still had a crease on the sleeve. I gave up and grabbed my keys. The drive from Chapel Hill wasn't long. I live alone in a one-bedroom near the university. My apartment's quiet. Books everywhere. Walls a little too white, couch a little too sunken. I'm not a minimalist, just lazy when it comes to decorating. I teach comparative literature at Duke, 10 years in now. Assistant professor, working on tenure. It's a good job. Great even. But not one you can brag about at a family gathering apparently. Not unless it comes with the word Harvard. That day, the air was heavy. The kind that sticks to your neck and clogs your thoughts. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. The sound of kids shrieking over a slip and slide echoed from the backyard. Someone was blasting classic rock from a Bluetooth speaker. The smell of grilled meat drifted through the air. I walked around back and saw them all, the usual faces. People I'd known my whole life, but who never seemed to really know me. I was the cousin who lived out there, the one with the books and glasses, the one who never really fit the family mold of flash, finance or fame. My mom spotted me first. She was wearing one of her loud floral blouses, the kind she only pulls out for family events. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, but her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been keeping up appearances her whole life. Noah, she said, walking over with a small plate of fruit in her hand. Thank God. I was worried you weren't coming. Just running late, I said. She looked relieved, then quickly glanced around to make sure people saw me. Go say hi to your uncles, she whispered. And Dylan's here. He just got back from orientation. There it was. The real reason I was summoned? Dylan, my cousin, 6 years younger, their golden child. He got into Harvard. Full ride. Honors program. Every branch of the family tree had been buzzing about it for months. Group texts, Facebook posts, even a cousin made PowerPoint at one point. I hadn't seen him since he was in high school when he was still all acne and awkwardness. He'd grown taller now, leaner. His hair styled like he belonged on the cover of a college brochure. I wandered toward the grill area where the grown-ups were gathered, conversations floating through the humid air. Harvard, someone said, clapping Uncle Greg on the back. You must be so proud. Oh, you know, he laughed, feigning humility. We always knew Dylan had it in him. Belinda, Dylan's mom, was dressed like a senator's wife at a campaign rally. Tight blazer over a sleeveless blouse, pearls, perfectly coiffed hair that didn't budge in the breeze. He was top of his class, she added. Had his pick of the Ivies, but Harvard was the best fit. I watched the scene from a few feet away, sipping lukewarm lemonade from a red plastic cup. Nobody asked me anything. Nobody even glanced my way except Aunt Margaret, who gave me a once-over like she was trying to remember if I was someone important or not. The applause started slow, then picked up. Some clapping, some proud nods, toasts being raised. That's when Grandma Ruth, seated in the corner on a lawn chair with her knees wrapped in a crocheted blanket even in the July heat, leaned forward just enough to deliver the line I could see coming a mile away. Some people, she said, her voice sharp and sweet like old apples, just aren't academic. It landed like a thud. Quiet rippled outward like water around a dropstone. I felt a strange calm crawl up my spine. Not rage, not hurt, just stillness. I could have said nothing. I usually said nothing. But that day, I was tired of being polite. I set down my cup and said, loud enough for all of them to hear, funny. I'm his professor. And just like that, the noise stopped. The kind of silence that makes you aware of every background sound. The squeak of the ceiling fan on the porch, the distant of a mower 2 blocks away, the sizzle of something forgotten on the grill. It took Dylan a second. He turned slowly toward me, confusion etched across his face like he'd seen a ghost. You what? He said. I didn't answer him. I looked at Grandma instead. She blinked, then looked away, her face tightening like wet laundry being wrung out. No one said a word. Not Belinda. Not Greg. Not Margaret. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just picked up my lemonade again, took a slow sip, and walked away toward the garden to breathe. What nobody in my family knew, or maybe didn't care to know, was that Dylan had been in my class for a semester. It was his first year, and he'd landed in my comparative literature seminar, a requirement for his major, though it was obvious he didn't want to be there. First few weeks, he showed up late. Didn't say much. When he did participate, he repeated something he'd skimmed from the reading summary. Essays were weak, rushed, disconnected. The kind of writing that said, "I don't need this class, and I don't care what you think of my work." I didn't mention our relation. Neither did he. I figured maybe he didn't recognize me, or maybe he did, and assumed I wouldn't say anything. He probably thought he could coast through the semester, slide by on charm and last-minute emails like he did in high school, but I didn't treat him any different. I graded his work the same way I graded everyone else's. If anything, I held back more, trying to avoid any accusation of bias. But when I overheard him telling a classmate that lit classes were a joke and this guy doesn't even read our stuff, it stung. I read every word. I stayed up late with grading even when my eyes burned and my hands cramped. I wrote comments in the margins. I offered extra feedback. I pushed students to think deeper. I tried even when no one cared. So no, I didn't feel bad that day at the reunion because the truth was, for the first time in a long time, I had taken up space. I had stopped hiding. Later that afternoon, I found myself sitting on the edge of the porch watching kids chase each other with water balloons. My mom sat beside me quietly, fanning herself with a paper plate. We didn't talk about what happened. She just placed a hand on my knee and gave it a squeeze. That meant more than any apology. Across the yard, I saw Dylan alone near the garden. He wasn't smiling anymore. No phone. No crowd. Just him with his hands in his pockets, staring down at the grass like he was trying to find something he lost. I didn't go over. I didn't need to because this wasn't about revenge or humiliation. It wasn't even about respect. It was about being seen for once. And I had been. That night, after most of the folding chairs had been stacked and the paper lanterns were swaying gently in the warm air, I sat alone in the car parked across the street from Uncle Frank's. I hadn't gone back in after my little moment on the lawn. My mom gave me a look as I stepped away earlier, one I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Not angry, not disappointed, just weary. Like, she knew I'd done something I couldn't take back, even if I'd meant every word. I was halfway through a voicemail from a colleague about rescheduling a committee meeting when someone knocked on my window. It was Dylan. He looked unsure of himself. His hands shoved into his pockets, a deep line creased between his eyebrows. For a second, I thought about pretending I hadn't seen him, but I rolled the window down. "Hey," he said. "Can I sit?" I shrugged. He walked around and got in on the passenger side. We sat there for a bit in silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Then he said, "I didn't know you were you. At least not at first." I kept my eyes on the windshield. "Yeah, I figured it out after midterms. I saw the family photo at Mom's. You were in the background. I guess I thought if you didn't say anything, I didn't have to either." "You didn't." He nodded like he understood that wasn't the point. "Was I that bad?" he asked finally. I could have said no, smoothed it over, given him some easy comfort. But I didn't. "You weren't curious," I said. "And you didn't try." He let that sit. "I thought the class was beneath me," he admitted. "I didn't think it mattered. I've always been good at school, but I never liked reading. I don't see the point in all those old books." "They're not old," I said. "They're just true in a way we stopped paying attention to." He looked down at his hands. His nails were bitten to the quick. I remember doing that too when I was younger, especially when my dad used to raise his voice over dinner. "I didn't mean to disrespect you," Dylan said. I thought I had to be the best at everything. And then when I realized you were grading my stuff, it felt like I had something to lose." "That's not on me," I replied. He nodded slowly, almost like he was agreeing with someone else inside his head. "Are you mad at me?" That made me pause. I didn't know if I was mad, not really. Disappointed maybe. Tired, definitely. "I'm not mad," I said. "But I don't know what you wanted from me." "I don't either," he admitted. We sat there until the porch lights started clicking off one by one. Someone dragged a trash bag across the driveway. The night folded in around us like a closing book. "I guess I thought you'd be proud of me," he said. "Quieter now. Everyone else is." I turned and looked at him, really looked. For the first time since he was a kid when he used to follow me around with a toy guitar and tell people we were in a band. "I could be," I said. "But not if you think being proud of you means applauding when you don't do the work." He didn't answer, just nodded, his throat shifting as he swallowed something that didn't want to go down. He left after that, walking back toward the house without another word. The next week, I got an email from Dylan. It was short, no subject line, no greeting. Just a single paragraph. I read the excerpt from the Zora Neale Hurston book you assigned in week 4. The line about there are years that ask questions and years that answer stuck with me. I think I was in a year that didn't know what question to ask. I'm still not sure, but I'm trying. That was it. No signature. No request. No attempt to smooth things over, but it meant something. I never responded. I just filed the message away in a folder on my desktop labeled Quiet Truths. Days passed, then weeks. The semester started again. I walked the long corridors of the Humanities building, past the poster boards with curling flyers for poetry readings and Marxist film clubs. My lectures filled up like they always did, half students who wanted to be there, half who just needed to fill a requirement. I still graded every paper, still underlined every phrase that missed the mark or hit it so squarely it made me stop and exhale. Sometimes I'd wonder what Dylan was doing up there in Cambridge. Whether he'd stopped biting his nails, whether he'd learned how to ask questions without knowing the answers. Sometimes I'd think about what Grandma said, about who was or wasn't academic, and I'd wonder what she saw when she looked at me, whether she thought I was wasting my life or if she even cared. I never told my mom what Dylan said in the car, never shared the email, not because I wanted to protect him, but because I didn't want it turned into something it wasn't. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a happy ending. It was just a moment, and that had to be enough. A few Fridays later, I found myself walking through a used bookstore off Franklin Street. The kind that smells like mold and paper and ideas left too long in the dark. I was looking for nothing in particular. That's when I found an old worn copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God. It had scribbles in the margin, blue pen, some underlines, a dog-eared page at the exact quote Dylan mentioned. I bought it without thinking, brought it home, let it sit on the desk beside the window where I graded. And that's where it stayed. Quiet, waiting, just like everything else. Fall settled in over Chapel Hill like a warm sigh. The tree started shedding early that year, and campus turned into a mosaic of amber and rust. I walked the same path from my car to my office every day, watching students scurry past with oversized headphones and overpriced coffee. They moved fast, like they were afraid if they stopped, someone might realize they didn't actually know what they were doing. I knew the feeling. My lectures had become more conversational lately, less rigid. I started asking more questions I didn't have answers to. Maybe it was because of Dylan, or maybe I'd just gotten tired of pretending I knew everything. Either way, something in me had loosened. One day after class, a girl named Aria lingered behind. She was one of the few who took notes on paper. Her handwriting was cramped and tidy, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. "Professor," she said, hovering near the podium, "can I ask you something not related to the syllabus?" "Sure." She glanced over her shoulder like someone might overhear. "Why do people act like they're proud of you only after you've succeeded? Why don't they care when you're trying?" That hit me harder than I expected. I thought about my family, about how quiet they were during the years I struggled through my PhD, working 2 jobs and living in a cramped apartment above a liquor store, about how not a single one of them showed up to my dissertation defense, even though I invited them, and about how suddenly, now that I had a title and office hours, I was something worth clapping for, so long as I didn't make them uncomfortable. "I think people don't know how to love someone in the middle," I said. "It's easier when there's a headline, when they can say, 'See what they became,' but trying? That's messy. It makes people nervous." Aria nodded. I just wanted to hear someone say that. She left without another word, and I sat there for a long time after staring at the whiteboard with half-erased notes from a lecture on Baldwin and identity. The weeks blurred. One evening, I stopped by my mom's house. She lived in Carborough now, in a quiet neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and mailboxes tilted just enough to notice. She opened the door in her slippers, holding a bowl of dough. "Didn't know you were coming," she said, stepping aside to let me in. I was in the area. She didn't press. Just went back to kneading dough like she had something to prove to it. We sat in the kitchen while the oven preheated. The room still smelled like the potpourri she used when I was in high school, something floral and a little too strong. The walls were covered with pictures, mostly of my nieces and nephews, but tucked in the corner was one of me in my regalia, standing alone on the steps of the auditorium. "I saw Dylan on TV," she said after a while. "Yeah?" She nodded. "He was in a panel discussion. Something about youth leadership." I said nothing. "He looked tired," she added. "Older, not like before. He's growing up." She looked at me, hands still. "He wrote to your uncle. Said he might take time off next semester. Said he's thinking about switching majors." That surprised me. "To what?" "Didn't say. Just that he's rethinking some things." I sipped my coffee. It had gone cold. "He talked to you?" "No." She hesitated. "He mentioned you. Said you were the only person who ever told him the truth." That made my throat tighten, not in a proud way. In a God, how much was he carrying? Kind of way. "You did the right thing," she said. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I believed her, Later that night, after I got home, I dug out that old folder on my computer, the one with Dylan's email. I opened it again, read it slowly, then closed it without doing anything. I didn't know what I wanted from him, or if I wanted anything at all. Some part of me felt like we'd both been shoved into roles we didn't audition for. I was the quiet cousin, the academic recluse. He was the golden boy, and neither of us had asked for any of it. I thought about the last reunion I attended before this one. How small Dylan had been back then. 10 or 11 maybe. He'd sat at the kids' table, drawing superheroes in a spiral notebook. He'd shown me one, some spiky-haired figure that could fly and shoot lightning. "He's the best one," he'd said, eyes wide. "No one can beat him." I asked him what the superhero's weakness was, and he'd frowned. "He doesn't have one," Dylan said. Even then, he needed to be invincible. Thanksgiving crept up fast. My mother called to ask if I'd be coming. I said, maybe. "You know the family will be there," she said, not pushing, just laying it out. "I know. They're not as mad as they were," she added. "Were they ever mad or just embarrassed?" That quiet pause. Then maybe both. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. A few days before the holiday I got a letter in the mail, not an email, not a text, a proper letter with a return address stamp from Boston. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neat handwriting. No salutation. "I'm sorry for how I acted. Not just that day, but before. I was afraid people would stop clapping if they knew I didn't always feel smart. You didn't humiliate me. You freed me." I didn't know how heavy the applause was until it stopped. "I'm applying to the education program next semester. I want to teach. Maybe not college, but somewhere." That was it. No name signed, but it didn't have to be. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. The heater hummed in the background. Outside the trees had shed nearly everything, just bare branches now, reaching toward a gray sky like they wanted to explain something they didn't have the words for. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it inside the book I'd bought from the used store, the one with the scribbled margins. Sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes that's where things begin. Thanksgiving came and I went, not for them, not even for my mom. I went because I wanted to look all of it in the face. Everything I'd spent years pretending didn't bother me. The offhand comments, the eye rolls when I brought books to the porch instead of beer, the way nobody asked about my work unless it had something to do with someone else in the family. They held the dinner at my Aunt Cheryl's this time. She'd redecorated the place in a kind of forest style. Plaid runners, ceramic pumpkins, copper utensils no one was supposed to use. There were about 20 of us crammed into the dining and living area. Folding chairs dragging on the hardwood floors, kids climbing over everything while the adults talked in circles about interest rates and flight delays. I walked in quietly, nodded to whoever made eye contact, and took a seat at the edge of the room. Dylan wasn't there. I'd asked Mom on the drive over if he was coming. She just said, "He's figuring things out," which either meant he was ashamed or free, maybe both. Uncle Frank made his usual toast before dinner, talked about family, how lucky we were to still gather like this despite all the busy lives we lead. Then came the real reason for the gathering. What the family never said out loud, but always danced around, the brag parade. One by one, people shared little updates. Marissa opened a Pilates studio. Gabe made partner at some firm. Jenna's twins got into Duke. And right on cue, Aunt Cheryl cleared her throat. "We're just so proud of Dylan," she said, hands folded like she was at church. Even though he couldn't make it this year, Harvard keeps him busy of course. He was recently selected to lead a seminar for incoming freshmen, very selective. And his paper on education reform got picked up by Journal. There was polite applause. A few raised eyebrows. Cousin Teddy muttered, "Damn, overachiever," and they all laughed. Then Aunt Cheryl turned her gaze to me, all sugar and lemon. "And of course," she added, "Dylan's success comes from a long line of academics in the family." Her voice had a mocking lilt to it. "We all remember when you used to teach, right?" she said to me, grinning. "How's that going?" I set down my fork. I looked around the table. No one stopped eating. No one called her out. They just waited. That same old script. I'd take it. I'd deflect. I'd go quiet. "Not this time." "You mean still teach?" I said calmly. "It's going great. I just got tenure." The clinking stopped. A few heads turned. "Tenure?" Someone asked. "Wait, where again?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the printout. I'd never planned on using it. Had printed it just to look at it on the drive home, but I brought it just in case. I placed the paper on the table, sliding it to Aunt Cheryl. It was a copy of the journal her son's paper was picked up by. Right beneath Dylan's name was mine. Author, Dylan Rathmore. Advisor, Dr. Ria Banerjee. They all stared. "He's my student," I said. "Has been for over a year." "That seminar he's leading? I nominated him for it." Silence. Real silence. You could hear the turkey cooling in the middle of the table. I leaned back in my chair. "He's earned a lot on his own," I added. But he nearly flunked out first semester. He wasn't ready. He was overwhelmed. I held the line. I made him do the work. And when he finally did, it was brilliant. Not because he's gifted, because he finally stopped performing and started asking real questions. No one moved. I didn't say anything before I said, my voice lower now because I didn't want him to be embarrassed. But I also got tired of sitting here every year listening to this family clap for a version of him that doesn't exist. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Aunt Cheryl's face had gone pale. My uncle looked like he was chewing his tongue. Anyway, I said, grabbing my bag. I should go. Got papers to grade. I stood. My mom looked at me, eyes glassy, but she didn't say a word. As I walked toward the door, someone clapped. Just one person. My cousin Ray. She'd always been quiet. Taught middle school science in Durham. No one ever asked her much either. Then Teddy joined in. Then, Gabe. I didn't need a standing ovation. I wasn't looking for one. But damn, it felt good to hear. I left the house feeling like I could breathe deeper than I had in years. Like, I'd stopped holding something, and something I didn't even know I'd been carrying. Later that night, I got a text from Dylan. I heard what you did. Thank you. I don't deserve it yet, but I'm trying to. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Good. Now go write something real. That was the last thing I sent. I didn't need a back and forth. I didn't need him to say more. The truth was out now. The pedestal was gone. And maybe, just maybe, we could both start from the ground up. For the first time, it felt like mine was solid, and that was enough.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and follow.